Welcome to episode 3 in my 9-day bike trip series, exploring central and eastern Ontario from the seat of my bicycle. In this installment I'll be starting from Sandbanks Provincial Park and riding to Wolfe Island. My route to get there will take me through Glenora, where I'll catch a ferry across the Bay of Quinte. On the other side I'll follow the Lake Ontario shoreline until I get to the city of Kingston, where I'll catch another ferry over to Wolfe Island. Today is Monday, May 20th, 2019, and I woke up at my campsite at Sandbanks Provincial Park at 7 a.m. Last night there was a thunder shower before I went to sleep, but it only lasted about an hour, and when I packed up my tent this morning it was almost completely dry already. I opened up the container where I prepared my overnight oats last night and enjoyed my delicious breakfast. As I was eating my breakfast, some fog rolled in over at the beach. I had everything packed up and ready to leave this morning by around 8:15 a.m. The temperature is currently 10 degrees Celsius, and I started my ride wearing a jacket and pants. On my way out of the park I spotted these white trilliums, which are Ontario's provincial flower. I took this shortcut from the outlet campground directly onto the road and saved myself having to ride all the way back to the west end of the park. The water I'm riding along beside here is East Lake, which feeds the outlet river into Lake Ontario. After climbing to the top of this hill, there wasn't any fog and the sun was shining. I removed my jacket and pants and applied some sunscreen. Today is the Monday of the Victoria Day long weekend, which means it's a statutory holiday here in Ontario. I'm now approaching the community of Cherry Valley. What a great mailbox. I'm currently riding on a main road, but the traffic seems really light at this time in the morning. I was enjoying the scenery on this road so much that I accidentally missed my turn and had to backtrack a bit. The route I've chosen takes a bunch of really quiet back roads and bypasses the community of Picton. Picton is the largest community in Prince Edward County and would be interesting to see, but quiet back roads like this are what I live for on these trips. Overhead I could hear a small airplane, and when I looked up I could see it flying around in circles doing stunts. Distracted watching the plane as I rode, I realized I had missed another one of my turns and had to go back. I noticed a lot of buildings through this area that were kind of broken down and falling apart. This is scenery that possibly not everyone would appreciate, but for whatever reason I seem to enjoy it. I stopped for a quick break here to stretch my muscles. When I continued riding along this road, there were two large dogs from one of the farms that came onto the road and started chasing my bike. I'm now riding past the Photo Light Solar Project. It's a 10 megawatt solar facility and it looks absolutely enormous. It spans nearly 75 acres and has about 50,000 panels. This road has so many potholes that it's actually more bumpy than the gravel I was just riding on. The water body over on my right is called the Lake on the Mountain. The small lake sits at the top of this hill and is roughly 60 meters above the water in the Bay of Quinte down in Lake Ontario. Down at the bottom of the hill is where I'll be catching my ferry across the bay, and I can see it's presently traveling in the other direction, so I've got a bit of time before I need to go down there. The community of Stone Mills, which later became Glenora, was first settled in 1784 by the United Empire Loyalists. It was also where the family of Canada's first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, lived for 10 years starting in 1826. From a mountain on the lake I had a nice big hill to ride down, which took me into the community of Glenora. I can see the ferry's now making its way back, so my timing couldn't be more perfect. As I was waiting for the ferry to unload, two other cyclists arrived who were visiting from Montreal. They loaded everyone on the ferry and we began our journey across the Bay of Quinte. This ferry is operated by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation and is free to use for all vehicles. There isn't really a place to sit down anywhere on the ferry, but I guess I've already been sitting all day thanks to my recumbent. The trip across was less than 10 minutes and I took the opportunity to reapply some sunscreen. The other cyclists passed me pretty soon after we got off the ferry, but in my defense I am carrying about 50 pounds of cargo. After getting off the ferry I'm now in the town of Greater Napanee, which is within Lennox and Addington County. Greater Napanee encompasses a relatively large area, and I won't be passing through the community of Napanee today, but I will be visiting it on day 6 of my trip when I'm heading back in the other direction. The road I'm riding on is called the Loyalist Parkway. On this section virtually all the traffic on it is fed from the ferry, which makes it really quiet most of the time. The highway is named after the United Empire Loyalists, who settled most of the communities I've been riding through. The Loyalists were families that during the American Revolution stayed loyal to the British Crown and ultimately fled here from the United States. Most of the communities along this road are really small, and based on my research I believe the first one I'll get to which has restaurants is the community of Bath. The road here follows right along the shoreline, and I believe these birds are cormorants. The land I can see in the distance with the wind turbines is Amherst Island. I've been seeing a lot of these blue signs on the road for historic plaques. Many of them are related to the War of 1812, which to be honest doesn't interest me very much. On the left I'm passing the Lennox generating station, and right next to it is the much newer Napanee generating station. Both facilities are natural gas-fired power plants. I'm now entering Loyalist Township. I decided to make a quick stop on the side of the road at this small business to buy some local maple syrup. Tonight I won't be staying in a campground, and instead will be pitching my tent in somebody's yard, and I thought it would be nice to bring them something as a thank you. Since getting off the ferry, I've certainly been feeling that the wind is behind me and doing a great job at pushing me along. Up ahead I'm approaching the Lafarge Bath cement plant, which has its own bridge over the road connecting to a dock where a big ship is parked. Here's a closer look at the many wind turbines over on Amherst Island. There are 27 turbines on the island with a total nameplate capacity of 75 megawatts. I'm now entering the community of Bath. The time is now around noon, and this is where I've been planning to stop for lunch. I was really disappointed to discover that all the restaurants here are closed today on this statutory holiday. They had an independent grocery store that was open, but after eating a cold grocery store packaged lunch yesterday, I'd rather have a proper meal this time. Just outside of Bath, I approached the ferry for Amherst Island, and I noticed the ferry was loading and had the idea that maybe I could go over there for lunch. From my previous research, I knew that the island had one restaurant, so I tried giving them a call, but when there was no answer, I concluded that they too must be closed for the statutory holiday. The island with wind turbines I can see up ahead is Wolfe Island, which is where I'll be camping tonight. Riding next to the road like this, I pass through several swarms of mayflies, which are those bugs that hover in the air and easily get stuck to you while you're riding. I'm now entering the community of Amherst View, and this will be my third attempt at finding somewhere to eat. Thankfully, many restaurants here are open, and I decided on a place called Capri Pizzeria. I ordered their lunch spaghetti with garlic bread, and the spaghetti was great and reminded me of my mom's homemade spaghetti. Back on the road, the time is now 1:30, and I've ridden 71 kilometers so far today. I'm now entering the city limits of Kingston. I decided to deviate from my planned route in Kingston and head north to visit the Cataraqui Center Mall. When I'm on these trips, I really enjoy listening to local radio stations, but sadly the portable AM/FM radio I normally use stopped working yesterday. The Source is one of the few places that still sells these devices, but I actually ended up buying my new radio from the music store across the hall. After that quick stop, I made my way back towards the Kingston waterfront to resume my route. The road to get there was kind of busy and not that fun to ride on, so unless you're in the market for a portable AM/FM radio, I wouldn't recommend this detour. Each time I get a nice view of the waterfront, it's encouraging to see that Wolfe Island is getting closer. This large structure over on the right is the Kingston Penitentiary. After operating as a prison for 178 years, it closed in 2013, and it's now a National Historic Site which you can go on tours of. Kingston is nicknamed the Limestone City because of its abundance of heritage buildings constructed from limestone. Kingston has a long history, and the first settlement in Kingston was a French trading post and fort built in 1673. This beautiful building on the left is Kingston City Hall. The ferry dock to Wolfe Island is right downtown, and when I arrived I discovered the next ferry isn't for another 45 minutes. Rather than waiting around, I decided to spend those 45 minutes wandering around the streets of Kingston. I really enjoy looking at old buildings, and riding through downtown Kingston is such a pleasure. The current population of Kingston is about 125,000. While I was downtown, I decided to make a quick stop at McDonald's to get one of my bike trip favorites, a vanilla chai tea iced frappe. This main road is called Princess Street. Kingston is said to have one of the highest number of restaurants per capita of any city in Canada. I made my way back to the ferry dock and watched the ferry come in and start unloading. The ferry was quite full, including many pedestrians and people with bikes. I found a nice spot near the front for my bike and went and sat in the observation deck as the ferry pulled away. Just like the ferry at Glenora, this ferry is operated by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation and the ride is free. The concept of a free ferry is a bit foreign to me, considering it now costs more than $8 for the pedestrian ferry over to Toronto Islands in my home city. The structure with the red roof is Fort Frederick, and behind it in the distance you can also see Fort Henry. Out on the water I can certainly feel the strong west wind, and I had to put my jacket back on. I bet those wind turbines are making a lot of electricity today. With the higher than normal water levels in Lake Ontario, This little island is almost completely sunken. The community surrounding the ferry dock on Wolfe Island is called Marysville. In the distance I had one last look at Amherst Island from earlier in the day before the ferry docked at Wolfe Island. In preparation for this trip I researched campgrounds on Wolfe Island, but my search came up empty, so I decided to try a website called Warm Showers. Although staying at provincial parks is nice, when I'm touring my basic need is really just to have a place to pitch my tent and a place to have a shower at the end of the day. Warm Showers is a worldwide network that connects touring cyclists with hosts who are willing to share their yards and bathrooms. So prior to this trip I reached out to a man on Warm Showers named Tony, who lives here on Wolfe Island and has graciously allowed me to camp in his yard. Tony's actually away traveling right now, but his son Eli's home, and he greeted me at the house when I arrived. Their family home is just outside of Marysville with a nice big yard, and my first order of business after arriving was to pitch my tent. The time is now about 5 p.m., and I'd like to see a bit more of the island before having dinner. Although I had aspirations of riding all the way to the south side of the island and back, it would have taken more than an hour, and I've already ridden quite a bit of distance today. Instead, I decided to ride toward the west side of the island. Wolfe Island has a total of 86 wind turbines, and they have a nameplate capacity of 196 megawatts. The project was completed in 2009, making it one of Canada's first large-scale wind farms. Wolfe Island has a year-round population of 1,400, and it's part of the township of Frontenac Islands, located in Frontenac County. The island was named after British General James Wolfe. I'm now following along the north shore of the island, heading west. I have a feeling the owners of this boathouse probably aren't too enthusiastic about the rising water levels in Lake Ontario. All of the wind turbines connect to a central substation on the island, which is connected to the power grid on the mainland by an 8-kilometer long submarine cable sitting on the bottom of Lake Ontario. Riding west and directly into the strong wind is certainly making me appreciate the tailwind I had for most of my ride today. Just off the shore of the northwest corner of Wolfe Island, there's another smaller island called Simcoe Island. There's a small cable ferry that operates from here to Simcoe Island. I had the idea that I might want to go across and visit, but the time is now nearly 6 p.m. and I'm starting to feel hungry for dinner. I'm planning on eating at one of the local restaurants in Marysville, and I'm not entirely sure how late they'll be open tonight, given that today's a statutory holiday. On my way back to Marysville, I made a quick stop at the information kiosk for the wind turbine project. These wind turbines are Siemens SWT 2.3-93 with an 80-meter height and 45-meter blades. Reading all that info about wind energy brought back a lot of memories from the summer of 2010 when I worked at a wind farm as a university co-op student. The ride back to Marysville seemed to go much faster since I had the wind at my back. The community seems much quieter now that the long weekend is mostly ramped down. The restaurant I chose for dinner is called the Wolfe Island Grill. They gave me a nice seat near the window with a view overlooking the water. I found the seating really nice and comfortable and ordered the Panang red Thai curry with shrimp. It was the most expensive meal on my trip so far, but really delicious. After leaving the restaurant, the temperature outside suddenly seemed a lot colder, especially with the strong wind. I made my way back to the yard where my tent was pitched and went inside the house to have a quick shower. As I was getting ready to sleep, I was sure to put on lots of layers of clothing so I can stay nice and warm in my tent tonight. I want to give a big thank you to Tony and Eli for their generous hospitality hosting me here on Wolfe Island. It's been a great first experience using Warm Showers, and I'll be happy to pay it forward by letting travelers stay with me one day. Including my exploration of Wolfe Island, I rode my bike a total of 116 kilometers today. Stay tuned for the next episode in this video series, where tomorrow I'll board the ferry back to Kingston and ride east to Charleston Lake Provincial Park. I hope you enjoyed joining me on the third day of my trip. If you watched all the way to the end of this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.